This episode of the Noble Warrior Podcast is brought to you by CK Lin Mindset Coaching for Entrepreneurs. Whatever mental blocks in your life you want to overcome as an entrepreneur, fears of failure, inability to take the actions you know there is to take, fear of success, 3 steps forward and 4 steps back, or even that thought of not feeling deserving after achieving all the success. Coaching is one of the most valuable tools you can have. It's an investment in yourself, and it can yield some of the highest returns. CK Lin has the skills that will empower you to achieve the most accelerated results you've dreamed of. To help you get started, CK is offering podcast listeners a free strategy session with him, a $1,000 value. Visit talkwithck.com and schedule your free session today.
This is such a beautiful setting to have a podcast. Yeah, I used to have my own podcast actually.
Did you?
Yeah, it was called Neonosis, New Knowledge. And I did like 20 episodes.
Why'd you stop?
It lost its charge.
For you?
It was a kind of more of a project rather than a consistent platform. At least that's how it felt in my body. Yeah, I've started to learn about myself. Like the best way I tend to work is in short, sharp bursts, and then relaxation. So like project work works really well for me. 9 to 5's not so much. Yeah.
Well, it's perfect that you're in charge of consciousness.
Yeah, there we go.
Now.
Yeah.
So, for me, well, I'm a little dizzy. This is my second podcast.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
My first podcast, I stopped after 12 episodes, or 6 episodes rather. And I realized because I was basically speaking to the void and there's nothing coming back, I was like, I was a little attached to the positive feedback loop. Then my friend and I, a few years later, my friend and I started having conversations about Joe Rogan, because this is the Kingdom podcast, right? And my friend distinguished for me, Joe Rogan 1 to 100 was okay, but now he's at 1,000 plus. He's amazing, right? When I realized that I really enjoyed this kind of conversation, this is really an excuse for me to have a conversation with amazing, smart, motivated people.
It's like a life hack for deep networking, and I hate the word networking, but it's just a really great excuse to sit down for a couple of hours with people you want to speak with.
So I realized for myself, even if I have all the money in the world, I would do this for the rest of my life because I enjoy it so much. So now there's no attachment to the positive feedback loop. The feedback loop is happening right now.
Yeah.
So for me, this is a great pursuit, very fulfilling. And thank you so much for saying yes to that.
Yeah. It's a pleasure.
How long ago was the podcast for you?
It was my podcast. I think I started it in September 2017, August 2017, and it went till August 2018. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you stopped recently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. About a year ago.
Yeah. An opportunity to...
Yeah, get my podcasting skills back, but it's funny being on the other side of it.
Yeah. I mean, now that you're in charge of consciousness hacking, potentially, because you're interacting with tons of leaders, investors in this space, it's a great opportunity to broaden. Now that you have a platform, right? You can build that potentially.
Yeah,
as an invitation.
Yeah, to deliver my spiel.
Deliver it, share it, because it's all about community building, right? There's so many people who are interested in this space right now. We wanted to continue the discussion.
Yeah.
Right. But before we go there, I want to talk to you about boxing a little bit. So you shared with me before we start recording that you've been boxing for 10 years. And I've just started my boxing ritual. And I got to tell you, it's not fun being punched in the face. Mike Tyson said everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So theoretically I understood that, and why I got into it is like a life hack. because I realized that we get punched in the face metaphorically all the time in life. It's part of being alive, part of being an entrepreneur. So I wanted to say, okay, let's really lean into that. And hence I'm the type of person who enjoy the discomfort. But literally right now I'm just getting punched in the face all the time. It's just not fun. So share with me a little bit of your boxing career. and why did you start? And then why did you stop? A little bit, that'd be really great.
Sure. So I grew up in Glasgow, Scotland, and I had a relatively comfortable middle class upbringing. And my godfather was heavily involved in the Scotland boxing scene, and
family business.
Something like that.
Good.
And I started going to boxing classes in this place called Denniston, which is a really rough part of Glasgow, when I was 13 years old. And there was I, a kind of middle class, private school kid, going to the nitty gritty East End of Glasgow. And
the grittier part of town.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I didn't really want to go. My dad thought it was going to be good for my spirit. My godfather thought, you don't have a choice here.
Yeah.
And for the
character
building for the first 6 months, man, I despised it, because I was going in and it was pretty intimidating. I don't know if you know much about Glasgow or Scotland.
No,
but
never been.
No, it's a tough old place. And so for the first 6 months I really hated it. But then I started sparring, and I started actually when I was about 14. Started sparring, and started really getting into it. And
so talk to me a little bit about hating it to liking it. That transition. Because I'm actually right in into the 6 month right now.
So a very basic answer is we start to enjoy what we're good at. So I think there's a positive correlation between our level of utility and our level of skill. And then that reaches a plateau in later years, I think, when it loses its fun because it becomes a chore. So I think there was a bit of an inflection point where I was like, hey, I can actually do this. I really enjoy the fitness aspect. And also confidence. I was quite a shy kid, and I was quite a skinny kid, and I think that played on my psyche in various regards. And so by the age of 15, I was fighting in the Scottish National Championships.
Oh man, you were on high level. Competing at a high level.
Competing at a high level, yeah. And I had a few fights, and it really became my thing. And what boxing taught me, and so I did it from the age of about 13, all throughout school and then all throughout university. So I went to university and I was the captain and then president of my university boxing team.
Okay, so you really competing at a high level.
A decent level, decent level. But it taught me so many things, man. The first was, boxing is a metaphor for existence. You keep, like you said at the start, you keep getting hit, and the option isn't to just go down, but you have to keep getting back up. And that's a certain, if you're not forced into that by life circumstances, that's a very hard skill set to train.
Right.
And so I think part of the problem that we have with this modern, rich, privileged lifestyle of the West is
comfortable.
We're comfortable, and we don't grow from comfort. We grow from discomfort. And so I think we have to set the conditions by which we suffer to such an extent that we're actually growing. Not too much, because chronic stress is terrible, but acute stressors to the system is actually very, very healthy for a living system. And so it was a metaphor for growth and for life, and it gave me a lot of confidence and fitness, and it just felt really good to be fit. And I say past tense because I'm nowhere near there at the moment. Nowhere near there. But anyway, when I was in my teenage years, I was really going for it, and I think I could have taken it to a higher level. If I really wanted to go for it, I think my level was such when I was 16 or 17, I could have taken more of the professional route. But I was more of an academic dude, and I wanted to go to university and things like that. And I took a year out, and then I went to university and I started training with a different trainer. And I'd won all of my fights apart from one up until this point. And then I got to university, and then I lost. The first, the second, the third. And I had this run of losses. And it was for the first time in my life that I was consistently failing at something.
Right.
And that hurt my ego like hell. But it was also probably the most profound lesson I've had at growing up. Because things had come like relatively smoothly to me until that point. But to lose so consistently, publicly, like in front of friends and family, it hurt. And then I became captain of the team, of the Oxford boxing team. And then we were going to fight Cambridge in the varsity match in my captain year. So this is the big fight, right? This is Oxford-Cambridge varsity, leading a team of 9 boxers, training 10 times a week, training camps, high altitude in Tenerife.
Oh, okay.
And it came to this Oxford-Cambridge fight, my second one. And I remember standing over, looking into the ring, having had this consecutive amount of losses, and I stood and I looked over in the ring at this place called the Troxy in London, and it was the first time in my life that I precognitively knew what was going to happen. I looked into the ring and I said, I know for a fact I'm going to win this, and we're going to win 6-3 in the night. There was just a clear, transcendent sense that this is happening. And there we were, and I won and we won, and I really felt that experience was like, even though you keep messing up, you keep failing, keep going. Your failures build your character more than your wins do. And it was beautiful, man. So I stopped that when I was 22, so yeah, almost 10 years, and ended in a high.
So let's talk about that, unpack that a little bit. Let's see, where do we start? Do you amp yourself up? Oh, actually, before I even ask that, so competing on a high level, is it a mental game or is it more of a physical game?
They're the same thing.
They're the same. Okay, so say a little bit more about that.
Okay, so here's a really interesting point. I think when I was boxing, I saw it all as a physical game. The mental side was, here I am facing guys that there's a lot of fear. Even Mike Tyson says, he felt deep fear every time he went into a ring. It's very raw, primal. This guy wants to hurt you, you want to hurt him, and you can't pass the ball like in rugby. You can't ask for a timeout. No, you're just gonna get hit.
Right.
And so I always thought it was a physical game predominantly, but then I started meditating after my boxing career. And now I'm at this place that I know that if I were to go back to fighting with what I know now through of the mind, I'd be in a much, much better position. That if boxers actually integrated more of the mental aspect, visualization, calmness, watching your pain, really feeling it, rather than trying to pretend it's not there. I think a lot of people, as a coping mechanism in sport, is to try to shut out the pain. From what I've understood through meditation, is that's actually counterproductive.
So don't suppress it, don't avoid it.
Feel it fully. And then you just realize it's just another sensation. And you know the 40% rule of the Navy SEALs? If you think you're done, you're only 40% of the way there.
Right.
Our body and our brain has this huge buffer
Right.
to keep us safe.
Right.
We can go so much further. And I don't think I've ever taken myself as far as... I never took myself, I think, as far as I know now that my mind can go.
Right.
So I would love to get back into it to some degree with this more holistic approach. But
nice. I love that.
Yeah.
So let's say someone's being metaphorically punched in the face in life right now. What would you say to that person? Because it's theoretically, people get it, right? The 40% rule, you hear people say, and top athlete, they say, you're so much more capable than what you think you are. So these things we hear a lot, right? But
cliches almost.
Right, but when you're in the middle of being punched in the face, when you're physically, or when you're metaphorically failing, and it's not just oh man, this freaking sucks. Any tactical suggestion? Well, I'm one right now. I'm speaking to that person, right?
Sure.
I'm being like even sparring and then punching the stomach, punching the head.
The stomachs are the worst, right? It's 10 times worse in the face, man.
You think here's the thing. On the sideline, it's like, oh, it's no big deal. But when you're literally being punched by someone close range, takes all of the breath out of you, then you're just like stunned.
I would much rather be punched in the nose than punched in the kidneys. Much rather. So first of all, I think there's a certain humility that comes from it. Like if you see a fighter who's got a big ego and he's pumping his chest out, he's probably not a very experienced fighter. Like humility, I think, goes hand in hand with knowing that like we're all vulnerable and fragile to getting hurt. There's a lot of luck involved. So I think like if you can integrate the humility piece, just like I'm getting hit, without, and this is the key, without collapsing, because there's fight, flight, freeze.
That's right.
Flop.
Right.
These are coping mechanisms for trauma. Getting hit in the face is traumatic. If your default operating mechanism is flight, which I think a lot of it is in this day and age, because if you fight, it's not civilizationally like as accepted.
No.
Especially if you come from like a more of a middle class background.
That's right.
So how do you maintain humility without collapsing? And I think we're all working at that day by day, like every day. Like fuck, that hurt. Part of me wants to run away, and part of me wants to, boxing I think taught me like to just keep pushing forward. I think the big thing about boxing is sometimes when I'm like when I'm fearful about like doing something, I have this metacognition that says, hey, but do you remember that time where you really didn't want to go into a ring and get punched, but you did it?
Yeah. So I'm the kind of guy who enjoys the discomfort. Hence, hape and ayahuasca and CrossFit and boxing. And some people watch me on the side, but like, man, or ice bath, and someone's watching me on the side. It's like, man, this guy is, quote unquote, crazy, right? For wanting to do that. But for me, it's there's a lot of spiritual growth that comes into that, because then I'm willingly going there and getting into the ice bath and doing the hape or the ayahuasca or the boxing or whatever it may be, knowing that it's going to be challenging. But from that's. And I think Viktor Frankl says it so well. It's like between stimulus and response, there's a lot of space, and in that space lies a lot of freedom and a lot of growth. So I could fight, flight, freeze, or flop, as you said, but I choose to continue to move forward in any way.
So I've been thinking about this a lot recently, that this celebration of spiritual suffering, how much of it is real, and how much of it is a residue of a Judeo-Christian like Protestant ethic that says if you want to get to God, you have to, bear the burden of the cross of suffering. It's inbuilt into our mythology, and in Buddhism. Like life is suffering.
Life is suffering, right?
So something I'm playing with and I'm open to exploring is how true is that? Like how necessary is suffering as a prerequisite to spiritual growth? My experience thus far is it's necessary.
It is necessary.
I am curious as to whether or not, though, that is a residual belief.
Yeah.
And that actually maybe the path could be lighter.
For sure. Absolutely. So from my own spiritual journey myself, I realized that joy is in fulfillment and self-realization is available. It's within that option, right? Stimulus and response. But I don't know if I can get to that point without the different path to that point. I don't know if that makes any sense, because it's hard to articulate this. I'll just use myself as an example. In, let's say, an ayahuasca ceremony, it's painful. Like, you experience both the joy, but also at the same time, you also experience moments that you're not so proud of, as an example, right? The painful part. All of it, right? So, could I have gotten the lesson from an embodied way without actually witnessing the suffering part. I wonder.
Well, I think what the suffering represents is like if in a plant ceremony or something, it's oftentimes the stuff that we've refused to feel because it's been too painful. And so our body has this very deep intelligence to say, hey, your system can't handle the shame, the guilt, the fear. So we're going to put these energy blockage layers so you don't have to feel. And then you move into some, transformational work. And you're feeling all the things that have been suppressed.
Right.
And so really, I think suffering is often just a proxy for feeling what is already there. It's not necessarily creating anything new. And if spiritual growth is anything, it's the acceptance,
the allowing of
the whole spectrum of reality, which isn't asymmetric. I wish, I wish reality was like curved to the upside. It's not. Reality is also like tragic and horrific, and also simultaneously joyful and beautiful. So sport gives us an opportunity to get to force us to look at the pain. And as a result, I think opens us up to the totality of our experience.
Yeah. I'm thinking back right now. I mean, there's so many metaphors that can kind of go with that. It could be going to be an entrepreneur. You get the highs and highs, but also the lows and lows, right? In any kind of meaningful relationship you're getting with. Similar, right? The highs are highs and the lows are lows that almost no one knows about unless you open to share with your close group of people. Or plant medicine ceremony, similar, right? You experience all of that. So, do you feel that, going back to your inquiry, is suffering necessary for growth? What do you say to that?
My experience so far is yes, but I don't know if it's. I'm in an open inquiry. I think so.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Now that how did you get into the consciousness hacking space?
So
did you always know that you wanted to get in there?
Oh no, dude, no. So I started my career in finance. I was at Morgan Stanley, selling foreign exchange and like interest rates. FXEM sales I was doing at Morgan Stanley,
right.
And I don't know why I said interest rates. I meant options.
Right.
And I did that for some time and wasn't particularly fulfilled, and realized I wanted to explore really the things that really turned me on. So I used to like come back from like a long day at work and listen to Terence McKenna and Alan Watts, and something in me was like, well, what if this is, why is it that I can read an FX morning brief and like lose concentration in 7 seconds, but read an Alan Watts book from front to back without losing concentration like hardly at all? Something in me was like, well, maybe this is the thing that lights you up. Like what would it be like if you were to explore consciousness? And so I moved out to San Francisco 2 years ago from the UK to do a master's in philosophy and consciousness.
Okay.
And consciousness hacking, what that represents is this synthesis between the head and the heart. A lot of people, I'm sure you know, in the consciousness world, and for your listeners, I'm doing like earmarks, quotation marks.
Yeah, the air quotes.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of up and out. It's quite ethereal, new agey, woo, can be. Consciousness hacking was a community in San Francisco that was this real synthesis between let's think deeply and transcendentally, but without losing our grounding in the rational and the pragmatic.
That's right. We live in this physical realm, right? It's not meant to. I think I love this phrase from Vipassana. Essentially, we study the mechanics of how the Buddha achieved enlightenment or self-awareness. And then they also made a distinction about, hey, there are these people who dedicate their life to self-transcendence. We call them monks and nuns, right? And then there's the rest of us who are householders. And then they distinguish that, hey, it's actually much more difficult for householders because we have other responsibilities in addition to our desire for self-realization, self-awareness. So definitely, it's, to me anyway, it's much more difficult to balance this worldly pursuit in addition to a spiritual journey.
Yeah, and your worldly pursuits, and this is karma yoga, right? It's the yoga of action. That your spiritual path is actually fundamentally intertwined with how you show up in the world. And especially in this age, if we're going to like continue the Hindu or if we're going to use Hindu mythology, this is the Kali Yuga. And supposedly in the Kali Yuga, it's not about retreat, it's actually about action. Is the path to God. And repeating Ram's name over and over again is another path, but that's a different story. Yeah.
So was there a moment where you said, hey, this is awesome, I want to pursue this full-time as my profession? Because there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is Derek Sever, the founder of CD Baby. He said, hey, separate what gives you joy, your hobbies, your passion, from your, what you do to make a living. Because when they're intertwined, then now you're bringing that concerns of like, hey, I gotta make a buck with this thing. And then it loses that spiritual charge, as you said earlier, right? So that's one school of thought. Another school of thought is, I think it was Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss, right? It's the dream if you can actually make a living from your passion and from your, what gives you fulfillment. So I'd love to hear your distinction between these two quote-unquote paths.
So repeat the first one again. So the second was follow your bliss.
Right. The first one is separate them.
Oh, I see. Oh, sorry, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So Campbell also said later on that he wished he'd said follow your blisters. Don't know if you knew he updated the quote.
I did not know that, no.
He said he wished he'd said follow your blisters. Because follow your bliss can be a bit of a spiritual bypassing technique. I think that the mechanics of, so this is what I said to myself, CK. I said, okay, well, what if you just threw yourself into what you loved for 2 or 3 years? Like, what if it goes tits up? If it goes terribly wrong, then what's the worst thing that's happened?
Right.
You've lost 3 years, but you've tried it and you've gone for what you love. Then you can go back.
Right.
So really, it was just a sense of me saying, okay, well, what if I tried this? Of like, and from a really rational perspective, there's the sense of, well, if I really enjoy something, then there's a higher probability I'm going to be good at it.
That's right.
So I think follow your bliss is really optimize for what you're interested in, because that is a proxy for what you're going to be most likely good at. Yeah. But to go back, was there a moment or anything? There was actually a very clear moment.
There was a moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I went, I had some body work done, and a bunch of unreleased stuff came up in the aftermath. Anger, rage, and it all came like flooding through my body, and I started like letting it all out, but it felt like in a way that was clean. Like I had some tough conversations and really like spoke like the deepest, most primal part of what I thought to be true. And with that expression came this perfect clarity. It was just this knowing of like, you've got to go to San Francisco, you've got to go do consciousness, you've got to go do it now. And man, I've never had clarity like that.
Wow.
I'm a cost-benefit analysis guy. I'm checklists and boxes. And it was clarity from emotional desuppression, which is fascinating. I think we're so stuck. We're all confused because we actually haven't let our body's wisdom come through.
So, question there, because I do plenty of plant ceremonies, plant medicine ceremonies, and then one of the things that I teach my clients regarding integration is, hey, you're gonna have a lot of clarity and a lot of insights, a lot of epiphany that comes to you, but don't do anything with it yet. Just let it sit, right? Did you let it sit, or it was more like just follow my realization, my inner knowing, my impulse, just gonna go with it? Quit my job and just go.
So I already wasn't in my job. I was still in this. I was in a liminal space anyway. So I think our body mechanics are actually programmed for different things. I want to make a distinction between impulse and intuition.
Sure.
Impulse feels a little bit more rushed, snappy. Intuition feels clean. I want to use that word. There's a lucidity to its experience. And this felt very clean. And it also felt light. And so I didn't wait. I didn't let it sit. And I also think, like, as I started to learn my body more, some people are better attuned to sitting with things. Other people's body mechanics are actually more attuned to making more spontaneous decisions. I don't know if you've done any human design.
No, I have not.
Yeah, there's different like systems to say, hey, we're all created in slightly different ways.
Huh. Interesting. So
yeah.
it's not a one size fits all. Some people are more suitable to take action right away. Some people are more suitable to just let it sit and develop that inner knowing.
I think so. I think that is the beauty of reality. We have these permutations of matter that we call bodies, and they all have different ways of knowing and navigating reality if we truly listen to them. Having said that, have I been able to get that clarity back since then? Not really.
No,
that was the big breakthrough. So now I know what clarity feels like.
You have a benchmark.
I have a benchmark, and now everything feels quite unclear since then.
So okay, so in that also, do you try to get back to that space again, the moment of lucidity and clarity? Because it's easy to want to chase that, right? And also there's an intention to cultivate that too. How do you separate the chase versus the cultivation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Silence helps. I've tried body work. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. There's a sense of, yes, the more I can tap into silence, the more clear things become. Yeah.
Awesome. So do you have like a daily ritual that you do, or a weekly one, where you just essentially carve out the time that you need to?
Yeah, I sit every day for an hour, first thing in the morning.
First thing in the morning.
But I'm about to do a new morning routine. You want to hear it?
Let's hear it.
Got a 30-day challenge that I'm starting July 1st.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And now that I've named it publicly, and now I've named it on radio, I can't go back.
Okay.
1 hour meditation in the morning.
Okay.
Which is Vipassana.
Yeah.
Then I'm going straight to an Ashtanga class for 90 minutes. And then right beside the Ashtanga class is a sauna and cold plunge.
Oh, no kidding.
So I'm going to then go straight into the sauna for 20 minutes, do some vagus nerve breath stimulation work. Kind of like Wim Hof, but some more like actual targeted on the vagus nerve. And also do some visualization while in the sauna, and then go straight into a plunge pool, and then I'll be ready to start my day. So it's going to take about 2.5 hours in total for the morning routine. But yeah, for me that's the perfect combination of mind for meditation, body through Ashtanga, and then breath work and stuff for vagus nerve and the mind-body connection.
I love that. I'm a systems guy, so I love disciplines, I love the rituals. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
so thanks for sharing that.
Cold baths.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're mind builders.
I love it so much that I actually bought an ice maker to put in my home.
So I'd love to do this. So how do you buy an ice maker? Like, what do you mean?
So what I did is actually bought those like 20-pound ice makers. They just continuously produce ice all the time.
And is there enough to put in a bath in the morning?
Oh yeah. No, 20 pounds is plenty sufficient for one batch. But I actually found a much better way. So you don't even need to do that.
Okay.
You can get one of those industrial ice coolers.
Yeah.
And then just plug it in, and then when you need to use it, obviously unplug it so you don't electrocute yourself, and then it will stay the same temperature at all times.
So have you bought one yet?
No, not yet. We don't have enough space.
Yeah, I was thinking, I live in San Francisco. I mean, there's no chance in hell. I mean, I can't even fit a bed into my apartment, never mind a bloody ice cooler.
Yeah. But the ice maker is much smaller.
Okay. Maybe I should... When I have my own place, the first thing I'd buy is a plunge pool.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins does that every morning.
That's right. No, I think him and Wim Hof were the ones that really inspired me. Like, oh, yeah, Tony Robbins does that too. Maybe I should consider it.
Well, and also first thing in the morning is you're timing it with your peak cortisol spike anyway. So you're actually like attuning to the body's natural rhythms of as soon as you wake up, first 90 minutes is when your cortisol is at its highest. So you're actually, you're doubling down on that effect.
Yeah.
That shock, acute stress shock to the system. But this is a really important thing, right? Chronic stress is horrific for the body. We're all chronically stressed. Food, toxins, noise. Acute stress, very good for the body.
Right. Little caveat there is, let's say when you're sick or when you're really low on energy, because these are additional stress, and that may actually push you or nudge you into sickness. So that's the thing to be cognizant about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Chinese medicine, we believe that you don't want to actually inject a lot of coldness into your system. If you feel like constantly you're always cold, it's probably a good time to, pull back on the ice bath or the cold smoothies or whatever it is. And,
Right.
Yeah, that's my personal experience.
Got you.
Do I have any scientific proof beyond that? No, it's just my personal experience.
Yeah. No, I mean even like Ayurveda and if you're I'm Pitta, fire, hot, always hot. So
this would be good for you then.
Yeah, this would be good for me then. Yeah, exactly.
Man, I love it. I really love that you are able to inject scientific understanding into your daily rituals. That's awesome. There's a lot of times where people just do one thing, and they fix to that thing, and without any really thinking about the science or things beyond that.
Well, there's also listening to your body, right? Like this universal one-size-fits-all thing we have. Like if everyone just meditates for a day and has the same diet, it's like, nope. Our gut microbiomes are different, our genetics are different, or we've got to just listen deeply to what is actually best for us.
So on that note, so let's speak to our younger selves who are not so aware or attuned to our mind, body, heart, and spirit.
How old are we going?
Huh?
How old are we going?
Let's say college days. Or 20. Let's say in our 20s, where we have that inner awareness, curious now, but maybe not so attuned to the body.
I'm still in my 20s. So.
Are you really?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
No
shit.
I
need to go back to college days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good. That's awesome, man. I'm surprised. That's you, because you act so much older than you are.
Yeah, it's kind of sometimes it can be a bit of a problem.
No, this is amazing
for dating.
So, going back to the days where you just began your journey of developing that awareness, that intuition, that inner knowing, what tactical ways could you make a suggestion to our listeners of how you actually develop that awareness? Because it's hard to discern, because it's all internal. It's not something that you can just point to a scientific instrument or the scoreboard. Oh yeah, you're now 85% or 10% more attuned to than you were before this thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you mentioned Vipassana. Vipassana attunes you to get very good at noticing subtle sensations. Another interesting thing is some sort of acting or improv. So acting that has to be spontaneous and in the moment, whereby you're actually engaged with the feedback loop of the other person's energy system. You start to become aware of these very, very subtle cues from other people. Like, small shift. Improv is really good for that. I loved it. I did it for like 3 months.
You did it?
I absolutely loved it. I don't know why I stopped. Time, but yeah. And then you can also dialogue. This sounds a little bit more hippy-dippy, but like asking your body, like, what do you want? And
so you literally say what you want?
Yeah.
Or only in your mind?
I mean, either or. And then trust that the body gives some sort of signal. And for me, oftentimes the signal is it light or is it heavy? If it's light, it's like, okay, try.
Yeah. I like that. So I ask similar questions to my podcast guests all the time. Some people flip coins. Some people have their meditation practice or somatic practice. I think it was Ben Talbert, who we know, mutual friend of ours. He would literally ask his body. How do you feel? And then notice the emotions, how the emotions arise in his body as part of his practice. So, cool. So let's actually shift gear a little bit. So now you're developing, you're now in charge of consciousness hacking and cultivating a community. And there's a lot of energy that right now going into this space. How do I unpack that question? How do you, what are your plans to cultivate this movement or curate this energy now going to the space?
That's the $1 million question.
Probably $1 billion question.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So for those who aren't aware, so consciousness hacking was started 4 years ago by my dear friend Mikey Siegel. And he started as a global community. He wanted to say, hey, like, what if we applied our scientific and technological knowledge to higher states and awakening? Because people think these two things are antithetical, right? Like, of course, science and spirituality have nothing to do with each other. Well, Mikey set out to build a community around people asking those questions. How can we build tools that enhance the human experience? So it started out as a global community, and now we're moving more into conference. You came to our conference.
That's right.
Awaken Futures last month.
It's amazing.
You had a good time?
Oh, amazing. It was like the TED conference for consciousness. I loved it.
Good.
Yeah.
I think people had generally had a good time.
Yeah.
So we're having our conference. We're wanting to do member-only community events. So at the moment we're doing more open events, but we really want to. Our turnover rate's super high. Like only
Members turnover rate?
No, as in people who even come, like 70 to 80% of each of our events is a new member. Is a new attendee.
I see.
Super high.
So never heard of you before. Yeah.
They might have heard of us, but they've never been before. So we want to do like member-only events all throughout the world to establish this sense of community, and also spread more awareness. So start creating our own content.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So turning into like a media company, potentially.
I'm reluctant to say turning it into a media company, but having more of a media presence is one way to put it, man.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it.
So what was your experience like at Awaken Futures? Which, for people who aren't aware, was a conference on the intersection points of psychedelics, technology, and meditation.
Yeah. Actually, let's do a little distinction real quick. How would you define psychedelics? Because I got corrected by a ceremonialist not to separate the plant medicine part and the psychedelics. But in my mind, actually, before leading the witness, how would you define psychedelics?
Oof. So psyche is obviously from the Greek mind or soul. They were the same thing in Greek etymology. Delix is, I think, the word inducing. I could be totally making that up. Like mind inducing. These are substances that invite us into altered states of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, so that definition is super broad, right? So caffeine could potentially be under that umbrella too.
True.
Because it does alter our consciousness in some way.
Yeah.
Right. Alcohol could do that too.
Yeah. What is the difference between
sugar? Right. Alters our consciousness.
Sure. Yeah. What is the? There's something about the level of depth that plays into this. Like caffeine doesn't really take me closer to my deeper experience. I don't think many people's. There's something about a deepening. But then that itself is subjective. So
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Tell me. Surprise me.
I don't have one.
Okay. Come on, man.
Yeah. I thought I was talking to the guy who would know.
Well, and then there's the entheogens, right? Which is another term. Yeah, I see them as alterers of consciousness, bringing us closer to our deeper experience.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So hence why I'm not so much of a stickler to this nuance of a word, entheogen, psychedelics, plant medicine, because to me, if it deepen our awareness of our own consciousness, then to me that's under the broad umbrella of psychedelics.
Yeah.
So entheogens. So to me they're interchangeable. Yeah. Okay. What was my experience? Going back to your question.
Yeah.
Yes. I had an amazing time. So one of the things as I progress in my own journey in life is the desire to meet like-minded people. And psychedelics, meditation, technology, these are my favorite subjects. So I love the quality of the people that were there. These are, to me, people who are not only philosophers, but are actually doing something about it. So I met plenty of like investors, entrepreneurs, even ceremonialists, or people who are grounded in reality in this realm. Like we study science, we study technology, and we're also having a commitment to, all right, so there's something beyond the physical realm, right? So I met to me, these are termed mystics, right? So I met plenty of mystics, I met plenty of people who are also grounded in reality. So I definitely met plenty of people in my tribe there. So
Good.
I really appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah. And there was
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, a lot of energy there. A lot of different directions that this movement can go, and that's the number one takeaway. Now, exactly which direction is "quote unquote" the right one, to be determined. But there's certainly a lot of the energy is very much activated.
I'll come back next year, my friend.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, hope that there's something that we can all do in between this year and next year, right?
Yeah.
In the in-between time.
Sure.
So conference bringing high caliber people together to share their thoughts right now. That's where you want to go. But what about the in-between time? Is there anything that you're active to cultivate, to shape the energy?
Yeah, we're gonna do some member only events, like I said, but also just standard events, and we're gonna do 2 series. One is the Awakened Futures spin-off series. So between now and the next conference, we're gonna have some of the themes and some of the speakers doing like talks in front of 300 to 400 people as a kind of extension of the conference. And then we also want to do a synthesis series.
What's that?
Basically bringing together themes and domains that are historically relatively in tension. So for example, like a meditation teacher and a technologist, or a scientist and an atheist, like a synthesis series, Because I think this is what we represent. We're bringing together tech, consciousness. We really represent. Have you heard or ever read any of Hegel?
No.
Hegel's evolution of consciousness philosophy.
No, who's that?
So
Tell us about it.
Hegel was a philosopher in the 17th to 18th century, I forget, and he says that consciousness evolves in a very particular way over time. That first there's its thesis, which is one side of the polarity, then comes its antithesis, which is the opposite side of the polarity, and it's only in the holding of those two things, in their absolute tension of duality, do they then start to come into synthesis. So that in order for us to go to the next level of politics, say, we've got to see radical left, radical right. That we can't get to the next level until we fully embrace deep polarity.
So one of the things that I talk a lot about with our guests is the yin and the yang sign.
Yeah.
And it's in the grappling of these two polarities that you can find harmony somewhere in the middle. And this harmonious point is very personalized. It's very individual. I can't really tell you what your harmony point may be, but it's through the grappling with these two polarities, right? The mental, the cognitive dissonance, the grappling with it, that you can derive your own answers.
Absolutely. And also not collapsing yourself into a single perspective. Like I think when people say I want to evolve consciousness, I think there's also a very cognitive component to that, which is one's ability to handle complexity. And by definition, complexity often implies paradox. Paradox implies being able to be okay with two completely fucking opposite things.
That's right.
As being true at once.
That's right. So I would say that would be a huge one common trait that your attendees have. They're open-minded to actually hear, like, oh, this person's point of view is different than mine,
Yes.
but let me just get curious
Yes.
about why does he think that way.
Well, this is what I really liked about the conference, was that a lot of people in the psychedelic community have some sort of like deep somatic aversion to technology,
Right.
which is understandable because the way our programs are designed and our software and our hardware is, these aren't deepening tools. But then what some of our speakers spoke about were, hey, like, what if tech could induce the similar states through hardware and software as something like LSD does through biochemistry? And people were very open to that from the psychedelic world who were there at the conference. So, yeah.
So question there, because I also have had conversations with people where they talk about the elevation or the transcendence of consciousness, whatever way you want to articulate it, as a natural process. And over there is not better than over here. So then why are we putting effort to try to be over there rather than just allowing the natural progression of one's own spiritual journey? What do you say to that?
I say to that, like, why should we get out of bed in the morning? Why is it better to get out of bed rather than stay in bed? That, like, life moves in a certain way. And I think there's a misunderstanding that in attempting to move forward, one is somehow pushing against the grain or like trying to accelerate things like unnecessarily. Like, if we were just to say let it all be, we wouldn't have cured polio. Innovation is quite oftentimes, our lives are better because we've said, hey, we can be better. Now, there's a distinction there between, like, let's just improve for the sake of improving. And I think this is what people resist, right? There's like, techno-utopian assumption of Silicon Valley, like, let's just build shit and the world will be saved. The other thing is, you said natural way. I think part of there's a bifurcation in our psyche between natural and artificial. I think in the same way we've had this bifurcation of nature and culture, which is disastrous because we're raping and pillaging the only home we have. There's also this bifurcation of technology and nature, natural and artificial. We are all expressions of the same thing. Tech is an expression of consciousness. The way we've designed it, though, is in a way that is not circular, not sustainable, and so it feels so other, right? And I think part of our deep mission at Consciousness Hacking is to realign that movement of tech towards life's more natural rhythms.
Which is what I really appreciate. Because you're not saying, hey, tech is awesome, tech is number one. Let's use all the natural resources we have to serve technology per se. And there's a through line that I hear is that homage, right? That paying it forward. So then it's about thriving of the entire ecosystem rather than just let me focus on make progress in this particular direction, but forget everyone else, who may have to pay the price, including future generations per se.
Yeah.
So, which I really, really appreciate.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there any specific technology that you felt really excited about, or a particular direction? So now that I'm asking you as an individual rather than a curator of your community, is there anything that you're like, oh, that sounds really promising?
Did you see Jay Sanguinetti's talk
on
ultrasound?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that's the big one. So ultrasonic neuromodulation, which is targeting very specific areas of the brain with sound waves, with ultrasound. I did that last week.
You did?
I had a shot.
You did?
Yes.
How was it from an experience point of view?
Very potent. So they have about a 50% success rate. I was one of the responders, so I spent about 16 hours afterwards in quite a deepened state of consciousness. Then it wore off. But anyway, the idea is you target three very specific parts of the brain, left, right, and the PCC, the posterior cingulate cortex, with 30-second blasts of ultrasound stimulation, and let it be. 50% of people, nothing happens. 50% something quite deep happens. So yeah, ultrasound's a big one.
Describe a little bit more about what happened. with that experience?
So,
were you able to write like a Shakespeare, like a huge creative burst, and write a book in 16 hours, or like just share with the experience of it?
It was much more, just a deepening into being, capital B, deepening into presence, a profound sense of peace. Yeah. It's quite hard to describe. I'd recommend people check out Persistent Non-Symbolic Experience, the term, by Jeffrey Martin. He describes these certain locations of deeper experiences. And he says, like, location 1, location 2, 3, 4. And I think my experience, it was more like, hey, this put me into like a location 1 PNSU experience for a few hours. Yeah. And the idea is that, I mean, the technology is still very early. It's very safe as well. It's ultrasound, very, very safe. When we start to have a better understanding of the brain, we can start to be more pinpointed with these interventions. Now, that is not to say that we can just like zap the whole of humanity into like an enlightened state of consciousness. I think that's a very reductive perspective, but it's a tool. It's a tool.
Right. So now that you have access to it, I wonder, are you compelled to or impelled to go back to that whenever you feel not center, not peace?
That's
peaceful?
The funny thing is, CK, is this is why psychedelics are non-addictive. They're not Moorish. And I think the same with meditative states. They're not Moorish, but they are reference points to say, hey, this is how you can feel. Like, this is your base.
Benchmark, yeah.
Correct. I said correct. That's a new word. You like that? Correct.
I like that,
A mixture of correct and right. Correct.
Correct.
It's it's there. There's like and so it's like you're swimming out at sea and you know there's a rope attached, and you might go out and you're swimming with sharks, but you know the rope's attached to the boat, and so you know you're safe. That's how I feel with having explored deeper states.
So I had a conversation with a friend who experienced plant medicine he's really new with it, and then he distinguished why these are called medicines. For him, the way he articulated it is, you are exploring the mental blocks, not mental blocks, like a brick wall, right, in your mind. And the top part is most of the time is what you can have awareness of. Let's say, something that you learn in physics or algebra, you're like, oh, I learned these things, and then this allows me to, look at reality or filter reality through these models. But with plant medicine, he now is able to kind of come down to the bedrock, to the foundation level. Like, oh, so I built these ideas from this, and this. And for him, he distinguished that it's very scary for some people, but he was willing to go there himself because he has the opportunity to examine the foundational blocks of his operating system. I'm using the metaphors interchangeably now, right? So, what would you say to that? Do you agree to his assessment how for some people it's really scary to examine the foundation, the core belief of who they are, or is that just part of, if you want to upgrade your operating system, is what it needs to happen?
All of these practices, whether it be plant medicine or meditation, is they take you to there's a deconstruction process, that everything that you think you are, you're not, and that includes this little root thought, as they say in Buddhism, called I. I. Our whole identity is based on this little guy called I. There's a guy or girl, and so to deconstruct the foundation of I is what we call ego death. It's this death of self. You've done plant medicine, so you know that the death of self is not a very pleasant thing, or it can be very, very terrifying. Yeah, and then there's this thing like a shamanic initiation. It is about completely deconstructing the foundation. and really seeing that there's no foundation.
Mm-hmm.
That reality is actually, the word groundless. That's fucking terrifying. The ontology of existence, like what it's made of, is nothing. Like, let that land. Now that can lead to nihilism.
Right.
And the flip side of nihilism is freedom.
Right. Hence why I do what I do.
Yeah.
So what would you say to the people who are like, no, it's too scary, I don't want to even contemplate this, deconstruct, as you call it.
Yeah.
My identity. I'm comfortable where I'm at. I have my Starbucks, I have my 9 to 5.
My 2 kids, my picket fence, and 2 holidays a
great.
year.
You guys do what you do. And then, plus, what do I get from that, right? Like, they don't know the potential from understanding or deconstructing that.
Well, I think I used to be in a position where I'd think, oh, you guys and girls, like, you don't want to go deep enough. When really, I'm seeing now, man, we're just all different expressions of existence. Like, just because... like, I used to have some sort of like meditation hubris that was like, if you ain't meditating 10 hours a day like I am, you ain't woke.
Right.
And it's just not that way. Like, I know there are much smarter, wiser, more loving people than I am who've done 1/10 of the work. We start to see that when we want to change people, like, that is our own ego complex,
right,
getting involved. Especially if it's regard to like spiritual stuff.
Right.
If we're trying to change people because they're killing people, different story.
Right. Right. They're impacting other people's freedom and safety.
Then we have, I think, some sort of moral responsibility to act, and this is where a lot of spiritual bypassing comes in. So I'm not a political pacifist. Like, if I were in charge of like a country, my war strategy would actually, I think, be very harsh.
Your war strategy.
Yeah, as in I think like you have to create a certain strong boundary to show that freedom is really important and fairness is very important. I think sometimes with spiritualism, you say, well, it's all one.
Right,
I can't tell you what to do. So that's not what I mean by if you're trying to change someone, you're somehow acting from an ego place. Like, there's an element of that, but then there's also an element when we do need to stand up and say, hey.
Right, there's that paradox.
Change.
That we talked about.
Change.
Yeah.
Change, bitches. Yeah.
Change, bitches. Yeah, from my point of view, it's an invitation. I can't make anyone do anything that they don't want to do anyway, because even if they do it, they will still be resentful and angry at whoever that made them do something.
Yes.
Yeah, but the opportunity is here if they are curious about deepening of their own awareness or understanding.
My whole experience of this has been when I try to persuade, people don't really listen. When I embody, people listen. It's very different.
Yeah. How do you know when you're embodying versus you're persuading?
I'm using less words.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not, there's not a trying energy, like, hey, come.
I see.
It's more like, this is where I am.
Yeah. That's interesting, though, because now we're talking about more of a, like, attraction rather than persuasion. And as an entrepreneur...
Yeah, fascinating.
Right? So
question.
how do you then discern? Because part of the process is awareness. Bring awareness to something that people may not be aware of. So, how do you stand in the making a powerful invitation versus...
Yeah, beautifully.
Versus...
Beautiful, man.
You know what I mean?
Great question.
Yeah.
Do you want to know my deep answer?
Please.
I have no idea how to reconcile those two things. No idea. Especially with capitalistic entrepreneurship, whereby there's a monetary incentive to persuade. It's very hard to get the incentives really clean, like really clean. But we live in a world of money. So, like, if you're not doing persuading to make money, then you need to survive. Right.
There's a way to make it self-sustainable, right?
And there's a way to be a positive sum rather than a zero-sum game. It's hard, man. It's hard And there's been a real bastardization of mindfulness and yoga out of capitalistic incentives, right? It's hard. I don't know.
Yeah. And plus, actually, one more thing about that too. Social media, are the options are infinite. How do you stand on top of the? How do you get through the noise?
Yeah.
So then there's, how do you make a polarizing statement and coming from an embodied place, right?
Yeah. And then there's the other piece, is like, what if you just trust that your truest expression is also the most compelling one?
Right, so there's that too.
Like authenticity being the sales tactic.
Right. People who resonate with your message of who you are, they may be attracted to you, but they don't even know why. They don't have a rational response. They just know whatever it is that you do.
And you don't have to brand your YouTube videos of like, CK Lin destroys reductive materialists.
That's right. Make it the clickbait headline.
Like Tristan Harris says, like, a race to the bottom of the brainstem.
Yeah.
Like, that works. But it's kind of fucked up because you're playing on our deepest primal fears. Yeah.
So the marketing side says, hey, you sell them on what they want. Then once they come in, then you give them what they need. Versus offering like an authentic offering and say, hey, you're going to come in. We don't exactly know what you're going to get, but you leave with more peace and.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's the other thing is, if you've been practicing for like 10 years and you know that this is going to benefit someone's health, mental and physical well-being, and you know there's a certain strategy to get them in,
right.
It makes sense.
So it's part of an option that you have.
Yeah.
The movement creator.
Yeah. Right. It's just, I think this is it can be kind of grey, murky waters.
Yeah.
I've not figured it out yet. I think my sense is I've kind of gone, my pendulum is still swinging.
Yeah.
Between intention and authenticity.
Right. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's challenging. I made an answer, hence why I was asking you, see if you have because part of what I do is I'm a teacher, I'm an integration coach, right? I'm an entrepreneur, and part of what I do is to bring people who are interested in deepening their own consciousness, to having that clarity, to operate from value, operate from purpose. And these are available tools. Do I move forward with them, like selling them what they want, which is high performance or more money, more connection, more love, and then really what they will realize that the root of what's available is more aligned mind, body, heart, and spirit, and then everything else will come easier. Right.
So I think the issue with trying to frame meeting them where they're at and then taking them somewhere deeper is that you then lose out on the market segment that are just ready to actually just go deeper, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't need the hand holding. They're there. Yeah. We have constraints. We have constraints of money and marketing.
All right.
Yeah. So what's your meditation practice?
What's my meditation
Do you
practice?
have one? Yeah.
I do have one. My go-to is TM, Transcendental Meditation.
Okay, so mantra.
Mantra-based.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a good rope for me to, in the sea of thoughts and emotions, that anchors me pretty easily.
To continue the sea metaphor, anchoring, yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Vipassana. Yeah.
Vipassana is very, very... So speaking of difficulty, I like the acute stress of plant medicine. Vipassana is essentially the same amount of stress but pull out for 11 days. And that was very, very challenging for me, especially day 3 when they focus on the Anapana. I was like, 3 days on this area? Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is with plant medicines, it's not as cumulative.
Say more about that. What does that mean?
You have your experience, and then a few days, weeks, months later, you're back.
I see.
Vipassana seems to be cumulative.
I see. So you believe that it's what you receive from each Vipassana, or each day of Vipassana practice, now you can add on to your stacking.
I think you're stacking in a very, very minute way. And after like 2-3 years, you're like, holy shit, like I stacked a lot. Plant medicine, if you're doing it 2-3 times a year, I don't think it's like tortoise in the hare.
The what?
The tortoise in the hare.
I see.
The tortoise ends up winning.
Yeah.
Gets further.
Right. Here's my point of view around that. The way I relate to plant medicine ceremonies is more, it's a way to benchmark what's possible.
Yeah, but once the benchmark's there, why do you need more benchmarks?
Well, because there's different depth of you, right? So the benchmark is there, but you can go deeper with iteration, right? And as an integration coach, I tell my clients, my participants, that this is only 10% of the work. 90% of the work is in your daily integration practice,
right.
Whatever that may be. It could be yoga for you, meditation for you, conscious nutrition, eating habits for you, conscious noble speech or your relationship with others, etc. Right? So
noble speech, I like that.
Yeah, noble speech, noble relationships, noble everything. Yeah.
Huh.
So it opens up their awareness to, oh, okay, so here's the gap between my commitment and my actual words, action, and thoughts. Then we work together to bring all that into their daily lives.
I hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. That's the way
that
I
makes
recommend
sense.
people to take that on.
That makes
so
sense.
It's not a silver bullet.
Yeah.
You got the answer, and that's that. So that's my approach.
I understand. Have you done any Joe Dispenza?
No, I have not.
You heard of him?
I have, yeah. You're the placebo.
You're the placebo, exactly. He's excellent.
Yeah?
Excellent. Basically, a lot of people, when they think about like healing the body, they think it's just about holding the image, holding the thought, and that visualization and manifestation is just about thinking about what you want, and then that will be it.
Right, the law of attraction approach.
Yep.
Right.
It doesn't work. Dispenza's pieces doesn't work unless you integrate it with a feeling. That the feeling is actually the signal to reality that this is what I've already received, and so you're actually teaching your body somatically, emotionally, in a way that is beyond just cerebral. So if anyone's listening and wants to try very powerful meditation techniques, I'd try Joe Dispenza.
I see. So since we're doing some tactical suggestions, what other things you believe people should, or we can invite them to experiment with?
So can I do a quick fire round?
The what?
A quick fire round. Quick fire tactics.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so number 1, lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming.
Yep.
Okay.
So read a guy called Charlie Morley.
Okay.
Who wrote a book called Dreams of Awakening. You can actually start practicing skills and languages and stuff in your dreams lucidly. There are various ways to get there. You can do reality checks throughout the day. You can keep a dream diary. You can take a drug called galantamine, which is an Alzheimer's drug, and it gives you a very bad hangover. But just if you want to try what it feels like to have a lucid dream. Yeah, so basically the idea is like we sleep 8 hours a night. We dream for 4 of those, which basically means if you live to 90, you have 15 years. Is that right? Yeah, half of a third.
Of dreaming time. Yeah.
15 years of lucid dreaming time.
Right.
So it's 15 years where you can actually work on yourself. When really we just think it's no time. But the yogis had something. And for the yogis as well, the dream practice was death practice. So lucid dreaming's been quite a significant skill set I've explored. Gratitude, big one. Intermittent fasting. Dry fasting actually has different effects on the body than water fasting.
What's dry fasting?
No water.
No water. For how long?
I know someone who can dry fast for 6 days.
What?
And I thought that was impossible, physiologically.
Yeah, I thought after 7 days we die, right?
I thought it was 4 days.
4 days.
Yeah, she does this. I think she also has showers though, and I think
your
the
body
might be absorbing. But anyway, there's some evidence that suggests that dry fasting has even like greater autophagy effects than water fasting.
Interesting.
Harder though.
Oh, for sure.
So I do some fasting. I don't do dry fasting. I do water fasting. But I'd like to try dry fasting.
How
do you want to do a dry fast with me, dude?
Yeah.
Just like this?
Lean into discomfort. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. How long do you do the water fast for?
Yeah, the last fast I did was a bone broth fast, and it was for 3 days.
I see. What's the benefit of fasting for you? Why do you do it?
Gut stuff. I've got pretty bad bloating. Also clarity, lightness. And also I don't think we're meant to eat 3 meals a day.
Yeah, right.
I think we're meant to hunt, find, fast, fuck.
Yeah, right.
Sleep.
Yeah. So, but what about the headache that you get from not taking in nutrient?
I don't get a headache.
You don't get a headache?
No, you get a headache?
Within 6 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Nah, no headache, man.
Yeah.
I get a bit hangry.
Hangry, yeah.
Big grumpy.
Yeah. You're not in a relationship, are you?
No.
Yeah, okay. That makes it a little easier.
I think my habits just now. I'd be a very hard boyfriend.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Even things like sleep. Like I was saying this to my friend this morning. Like sleeping in the same bed, I'm so sensitive to body heat.
Right. And people moving around.
Yeah, it just wakes me up. Yeah, and I really value my sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
High maintenance.
Hey man, I know exactly what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate this.
And there's also chanting stimulates the vagus nerve. Chanting and singing and gargling.
Any specific keywords they should put into Google?
No idea, but it's just chanting vagus nerve. Yeah.
All right. So chanting and vagus nerve. Look into that.
Yes.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being on, sharing with us everything that you share. Your story, your discipline, what you hope to achieve with consciousness hacking, and also the tactical, suggestions. Thanks for being here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening, everybody. My name is Joshua Fields, and peace out.
Where do you want to send them to?
So cohack.life is our website. I also had an old podcast where I have some writings up called neonosis.com, Neonosis. And I do a little bit of blogging on Medium, so you can find me at Joshua Fields.
All right, amazing. Thanks, Josh.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Great to see you again, CK.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for this, man.
We'll do a part 2 sometime soon when you come back to LA.
Yeah, when I move to LA.
Hey, perfect.
Cheers, man.